Hi everyone, welcome back for our third and final module in this class. We are now to the point of exhibiting science and progress in the museum, and today's unit is on exhibition and interpretation, which aligns with the two readings that you're going to cover from Alexander and Alexander. So exhibition and interpretation cover two chapters in Alexander and Alexander, and it is in essence a pretty practical guide to the process of exhibition and the process of making interpretation possible by the visitor. So when you look at the discussion post for this week, it's going to ask you to address understanding the differences between these two things and why they're both important to know essentially in creating your own exhibit. So all of the weeks within this module are going to help you essentially make sure that you include all of the necessary pieces in discovering how to exhibit the ideas that you have in a sound exhibit space in a museum environment. So exhibition is quoted on page 236 and defined as a showing or display of materials for the purpose of communication with an audience. So the display of these objects themselves are what we're concerned about when we talk about exhibition, right? Museums are multisensory experiences. Hopefully you got a sense of that when you went and visited a museum and did your review, right? It's not just about reading text or even looking at artifacts. It's about sounds, it's about touch, it's about smell in some cases, depending on how interactive the museum exhibit is, and tied into the exhibits exhibition, right, is the greater exhibition of how the museum is designed, who's welcomed into that space by its design aspects. So when you look at how you're going to plan your own exhibit and you're thinking about exhibition, Alexander and Alexander gives the guide that your exhibit should be centered around one of two things, or it could be a combination of the two, right? You either have some general themes that you would like to cover, or you have some objects in your collections that you would like to expand on through an exhibit space. For the purposes of this class, pretty much everybody is going to be on the theme basis, right? I asked you to come up with a topic, and now you're doing a project based on a topic. There may have been a couple of you who were particularly interested in a particular artifact. So that being the case, right, then you would form your themes or your ideas around this particular object. And if we look at like a controversial exhibit that we looked at earlier this semester, the Enola Gay, right, it would be an example of an exhibit formed around a particular object. So if you're doing a theme-based approach, which most of you are, the thing that you want to think about is how do your objects help explain the message that you want to get across? You may think, wow, these objects are really interesting, right? But you want to be able to prove in the assignment and by extension to the viewer that they actually have meaning, right? It helps you understand this concept that you're trying to get across in a way that not seeing the objects would not give you that same sense. So you do want to really think in depth about how the objects that you choose to display in your exhibit are doing something tangible for the visitor. When it talks about layout and how you would like something to move or a visitor to move through a space or experience things within a space, this is why I advise, among many other reasons, to use an actual place, an actual museum, so you have a sense of what space you would be offered and you can create a plan formulated around that idea. So definitely look into different wings and actual institutions, the institution that you're thinking of as a potential place for your exhibit as well. Lastly, when we talk about labels, right, it's not just about what you put onto the label, but how it looks, right? This isn't a book. It's something that people are in a space reading. Is it readable? Is it enticing? When you put these materials up in a 3D space? How do you expect people to view them? All of those things are important into ensuring that the visitor is getting the information that you feel is important for them to get out of this exhibit. So in comparison, when we talk about interpretation, right, we're talking about how museums communicate their messages to the public, right? So this is a broader process that takes place at pretty much every stage, right? You choosing to theme a exhibit a certain way, you choosing which objects go in the exhibit and which objects don't, you choosing how the exhibit is going to flow, how you feel like you should present information to the public. All of that is interpretation, right? It's all based on your interpretation as the curator in this relationship. On the other side of this equation is how you believe information should best be interpreted by the visitor, right? So the main question you want to ask yourself when you're doing this planning for your rough draft is, how do people learn, right? And this chapter is going to go into some depth to tell you different ways in which people learn and what's effective. And you can also think about your own experiences in museums, what's worked for you the best, right? Definitely consider personal circumstances. If you're doing a children's-based museum, right, children learn differently than adults. So how are you going to appeal specifically to children if that's your interest, right? Understanding interpretation is really about understanding the ways in which human beings experience the world around them, which is a complex relationship, right? So there isn't one right answer. Just because we've talked about science centers being interactive doesn't mean your exhibit needs to be interactive, but it could be the best approach for your particular topic and who you're trying to entice to come to this exhibit. So when we think about how these things work in conjunction with each other, one of the things that we have to consider when we think about objects is how we choose to exhibit them. And one of the best examples of how this sort of relationship tends to function is by looking at Native American artifacts, which have been used in Western museums for years, right? So we can see how museums have interpreted these things in different ways, right? You can have the same exact collection, and you can interpret it and present it in so many different ways, right? So on the top left here, we have the traditional natural history sort of exhibit, right? You're presenting Native American peoples as this sort of bygone relic, right? This is how people would have used these objects in the past, and it's very disconnected from our present existence, but it teaches us about a society or a community that we know little about. In comparison, on the top right, you have a more artistic approach, right? All of these different types of Native American pottery is presented similarly to a exhibit in an art museum for any other type of artist, right? So you're contextualizing it in a different way. On the bottom, right, you can take that same type of pottery, same type of societies, and then present it on a more historical analysis tied to the art, right? And not necessarily tied as much to the culture, right? So you're talking about like the evolution of a certain style of pottery over time, tied to different time periods in the history of the Hopi people, and also pinpointing particular artists or movements within that sort of development, right? So in this relationship is how collections affect exhibition, right? What you actually have to present, but at the same time, that exhibition style affects collection as well, right? What do we need, or what are we desiring to present in this exhibit affects what we tend to collect and think about as being important to making these ideas shine through to the public. So a few things to think about when you think about interpretive practices, right, is do think about your own experiences in the museum, right? What are the things that have made exhibits work for you? When do you feel like an exhibit is something that is closely connected to you, that you feel welcomed at, right? There are certain types of museums that give off very different vibes from other types of museums. And that's in their architecture, right? That's in their accessibility. That's in the people who work there, the ways in which they present items in an exhibit. So think back to when you visited a museum for the assignment or any other experiences you've had in a museum space. But think about like the actual multi-sensory experience that you had going through this space, not just about the information that you read or you viewed in the exhibit, right? How did it make you feel? And this feels a little wishy-washy at points, but it's a key component of understanding how people actually experience moving through these spaces. So that being said, you are turning in the final project rough draft at the end of this week. You want to look at the guide for the final project that's been up all semester. Don't worry about the imagery yet. Don't put any images in your write-up. You don't need the PowerPoint. All you need is the Word document where you talk about what you're planning to do for your exhibit. Definitely use these recent chapters from Alexander and Alexander to help you think about the logistical aspects of how to exhibit and interpret things, right? How does the exhibit going to flow? Why are you taking this approach? The key point that I want to get across is that when you talk about how your exhibit is planned, you want it to be always based in the literature that we've been covering this semester, right? Not just like, wouldn't it be cool to see this thing? That may be true, right? Maybe people want to see a space shuttle, for example, but you want to explain all of your narrative, all your exhibition and interpretation choices based in the literature that we've been discussing, right? You want to engage with the issues of the field that we've been covering for the past few weeks. What this means is, and kind of hopefully help clarifies for some of you that have questions about this, it does give you more of a twofold thesis, right? It gives you your thesis on your historical argument, right? The narrative that you have had reviewed by me earlier in the semester, but also about how you present narrative, right? Why are you presenting it in this specific way? And that's where the museum component comes into play, right? You want to make sure that you're engaging with all of the things that we've been reading and discussing to justify, right, to argue for your particular approach. Both of these arguments are based in scholarship, right? So that's what the public historian does, bridges these two worlds by knowing how to do good exhibition work and knowing how to do good historical work at the same time. So that is all that I have for you this week. We will come back for our last couple weeks and get you closer towards the end of finishing this project and the rest of the semester.